Good evening, all. Um, Yesterday I watched a very, very strange movie on Tubi, which I had never heard of before. It's called Horns. It's from 2013. Stars Daniel Radcliffe of Harry Potter fame. And it was directed by Akexandre Aja, and it was written by a guy named Keith Bunin from a book by Joe Hill. Apparently Joe Hill enjoyed this. He liked this portrayal, particularly Daniel Radcliffe's portrayal of the main character, whose name is real name is Ignatius Parrish, but everybody calls him either Ig or Iggy, Iggy Parrish. And it also stars Max Minghella as Lee Turno, who is his friend and attorney. Juno Temple as his love interest, Marin Williams, and Sabrina Carpenter as the young Marin Williams. Kelli Garner as his friend Glenna Shepard. Joe Anderson as his brother Terry Parrish. James Remar as his father Derek Parrish. David Morse as Dale Williams, as the father of Marin Williams. Kathleen Quinlan as Lydia Parrish, who's his mom. And Michael Adamthwaite as Eric, who's a friend of his, who becomes a police officer later in life. It's a film that's very hard to describe. It's a fantasy, horror, comedy, mystery, romance. It's all of those things and at once. And I think that's a bit of the problem with the film. It's a good film in its own right, but I think it kind of tries too hard to be all of these things at once, and that sort of affects the overall story in a kind of a negative way. It's a very strange film. It opens with a love scene between these two characters, Iggy Parrish and his beloved Marin Williams. They are in a forest setting. They're lying on a mattress on the forest floor and starting to make love, and he says, if this isn't paradise, I don't know what is. Make a note of that because it comes in later. And she kind of asks him some leading questions that she wants to make love, and they start making love. He says, I plan to love you for the rest of my life. And she says, I'd be satisfied if you just loved me for tonight. Then the movie skips forward, and we're now in a different time, apparently. And we see Iggy Parrish is driving his car, which is an AMC Gremlin, which, for those not familiar with 1970s cars, it was a really ugly muscle car that was short and goofy looking, and it has now become something of a classic. They were very hated at the time. And it's in original colors, which was kind of orange with black stripes down it. But he's being pursued by the press, and we don't really know why. They're calling after him, and he arrives at his parents' house, and he says to his mom, "Are you satisfied now? I'm so so famous that the press follows me everywhere." And then you learn that the reason that the press is following him, they think that he murdered Marin, that he murdered his girlfriend in a kind of a drunken rage. And apparently everybody in the whole town believes this. His friends, his parents, even his brother does not believe that he's innocent, even though he is. And he's very upset, and he storms out of the house, very pissed. His brother who's a musician, a jazz musician, tries to talk to him, but he's not really successful in diffusing his anger. He leaves the house in a huff and goes out to a bar, and even the bartender says, we don't really want you in here. You make these people nervous. They're barflies. He says, I make those people nervous. And he says, yeah, I wish you'd get out of here. So he leaves with the barmaid, who is his friend Glenna Shepard, who he's known since he was a little kid. And she has sort of a reputation as kind of the town slut. Sorry to use that word, but that's kind of what her reputation is in this. And he ends up sleeping with her. And when he wakes up, he was obviously very drunk. When he wakes up, he finds that he's starting to develop horns on his head, and he can't figure out what's going on. He suddenly starts hearing Glenna's thoughts. She's having these weird thoughts about she wants to eat this whole box of donuts, even though just eating one of them makes her stomach upset. He said, why do you want to eat the whole box if just eating one makes her stomach upset? She says, I want to be fat. He says, why do you want to be fat? She said, because when I'm fat, then people will love me for who I really am, and not just because I put out, I'm good looking and I put out, that's kind of a disturbing thought. But he leaves, and he's very upset about these horns. He's trying to conceal them beneath his hoodie. He goes to his doctor, and while he's waiting for the doctor in the reception, there's this woman with this horrible kid is like slamming stuff and screaming. And the receptionist says, gee, I wish that lady would tell her damn kid to shut up. He realizes that he's hearing this in his head. She's not actually saying it to him. And he says, well, to her, well, why don't you go ahead? And then she actually, somehow he compels her, actually tell this woman, why don't you take your screaming child out of here and have some consideration for the other patients? And the lady, he hears the woman's thoughts, and she's thinking about sleeping with her golf pro. And that, upsets him. And then he accidentally touches her arm, and he sees this happening in his mind. And he sees the young girl starting to scream after this. She says, I hate my mother. I wish I could burn her up. So now he's hearing people's thoughts, and he's very disturbed. He talks to the doctor. The doctor's thinking about sleeping with his nurse, and he hears that. And, he says, can you please get these horns off? And he hands him a razor saw and begs him to do it. He says, did they hurt? He says, yes, like hell. And that's obviously a joke. But he says, okay, I'll take them off. And he puts him under anesthesia. And under the anesthesia, we got a flashback. The flashback is of his life. He lives in this kind of crappy little town in, I think it's Minnesota or Wisconsin. It's a logging town. And he's like playing around with his friends, and he meets this girl in church who is the young Marin, played by Sabrina Carpenter, and she's flashing her crucifix at him in an odd way, flashing like light signals. And he says to his dad, what's she doing? And he says, I think it's Morse code. She's probably telling you, stop looking at my legs in church. And he goes home and he reads a book on how to decode Morse code and what to say, common phrases. And he reads this book on Morse code. And now, whenever they go to church, she's like sending him these little messages. But one day in church, she leaves her crucifix behind. The chain is broken, and he gives it to his friend Lee to fix. And he sort of reluctantly fixes it for him and gives it back, and he's going to give it back to her. Meanwhile, he's hanging out with his friends. All of them are kind of dumb. One of them, Eric in particular, has this box of cherry bombs, and they're using them to like blow up teddy bears and things, do really stupid stuff. And then he's left with finally just one. He says, no, nobody gets my last cherry bomb. It's just for me. And so come on. And young Ig, and I don't remember who played it, I'll tell you in a minute, says to him, I want it. What do you want me to do? He says, I'll give it to you if you take that shopping cart and ride it down the log flume in naked. And he says, I'm going to do it. And he says, oh, yeah, sure you will. But he does. And he doesn't strip completely naked, but he drifts down to just his underwear and his socks. And he actually rides this log flume, the log slide, basically, down on this shopping cart. And he launches off the engine, and he's plunged into the water. And now he's trapped underneath the logs. He can't get out. And he thinks he's going to drown, but his friend Lee jumps in with all of his clothes on and drags him out and performs CPR him. And Eric is saying, "Oh, you guys are gay," and he says, "Shut up," And then he says, "Well, I did it. You have to give me the last cherry bomb." He said, "No, you didn't. Yeah, I said you should go down naked, and you still had your underwear on." He said, "Just give me the damn thing." And he basically takes it from him, and then Lee says to him, "You should give me that because I fixed Marin's crucifix for you, and you owe me something." He says, "Okay." He gives him the cherry bomb. Later on, we find out that it blew up in Lee's hand, and it blew 2 of his fingers off. But Lee seems to be actually kind of cool, very chill about the whole thing. He's in the hospital. He say, "Well, at least I still have 8 fingers," which is a rather optimistic outlook for somebody who's just had 2 of his fingers blown off by a cherry bomb. But that seems to be, and I say seems to be, as you'll find out, it's not really later. Lee's nature, that he's very good-natured and gentle and kind, and he never has a bad word for anybody. He is now he wakes up out of the anesthesia. The doctor and the nurse are doing it in front of him. He's like, "What the hell are you doing? Why didn't you?" And this razor straw is still stuck in his horn. He didn't saw it off. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm sorry, I got distracted." And he just storms out. And he takes the razor straw out of his horn, which hurts now like heck, and he storms out. He starts proceeding with the fact that he's trying to find out who really killed Marin. So this is the mystery part of the story, and he has found that, like I said, through these horns, which keep growing larger and larger, that he can hear people's thoughts and he can somewhat influence them also. He finds out some really bad things, like his mother doesn't want him around anymore. She says, I don't want you coming here. I don't want to hear your problems. I don't really want to be your mom anymore." And his dad says he doesn't understand him, and he never understood him, that unlike Terry, his brother, he doesn't play music, so they don't have anything in common. That Marin was really the only thing he liked about him, and he thinks he's kind of a loser and an outsider. And this, really upsets him. He tries to reason with. He goes to. They had this little sort of a fort that they had in the woods. They had a tree house that they had discovered together. Well, Ig had discovered it, and then he showed it to Marin. And there's a trap door that he has a secret lock to, and he puts things in there like blankets and toys and things that he found. And that was where they found Marin's body. And he is hiding up there, and he doesn't realize that Dale Williams is holding a memorial service for Marin, and is talking about how he hates Ig, and that he took away his daughter, and blah blah blah, going on. And Ig is drunk, and he's up there and he's listening to this. He comes down, and there's a statue of of Mary, and he takes it and he smashes it, and he pisses on some of these votive candles that people put up. He says, "Where was God? She went to church every Sunday, and God didn't stop her from dying out here alone, alone and afraid." And Glenna is there and says, "What the hell are you doing? Why did you come here? Are you crazy?" And he tells her, what's going on, and then she goes away, and he's trying to find out. Like I said, he finds out that these horns have given him the power to interrogate people. And if he touches them, he can see into their minds and see what they know. And as the story progresses, I'm not going to give it away, line by line, bit by bit. But he interrogates various people. Some of these interrogations are just kind of frivolous. There's a whole scene in this bar, which I think could have been cut, and nothing from the movie will have been lost. There's nobody interesting in the bar. Nothing interesting happens. You hear some thoughts about the bartender, which are completely inconsequential to the plot, and could have easily been cut, and I don't know why they weren't. He starts asking his brother Terry what happened. They get into an altercation outside the bar, and Terry admits that there was an event that you learn about slowly, that he was going to ask Marin to marry him, and he'd even picked out a ring, which was kind of a serpent ring, and that's interesting because that comes up later. And it's gold, and he was going to give it to her, an engagement ring, at this little diner in town one night, and Terry, his brother, was going to be there with him, and he got drunk beforehand. His brother's kind of a drunk and a druggie, and they show this throughout the film. And he's waiting for him, and he goes there, and Marin breaks up with him. He doesn't understand why. He thinks maybe she's sleeping with somebody else, and he starts yelling at her, and she says, you don't understand, and how many people have you slept with? He says, you know the answer to that. Just you. She says, nobody does that. I'm going to move to California. I want to experience life. And he's very confused. He doesn't understand. He loves her so much, he doesn't understand why she's doing this to him. And thinks she's sleeping with somebody else, and starts yelling at her. And he storms out. And later, you see that she actually went somewhere with Terry in his car. And as they were driving along, she just says, "Let me out." He's like, "Are you crazy? Don't jump out of the car. You'll get killed." He pulls the car over, and she runs off into the woods. He says, "Hey, where are you going?" And she won't answer him. He's so drunk that he passes out in the car. That's all you saw from Terry at that point. So now Ig knows that Terry at least knew something that was happening. He gets into an altercation with him at his club, jazz club, and his cop friend Eric comes and arrests him. He sees in Eric's mind that he's gay and that he likes his cop partner. Again, I thought that was a bit gratuitous. It doesn't really do anything to advance the plot. It's just like the director thought, what's a good joke that I can throw in here? I'll make the tough guy cop turn out to be gay. I don't think that was really necessary. I think it's a little bit insulting and a bit homophobic, quite frankly. Doesn't advance the plot. It's just something silly that they threw in. Again, a little trying to be comedy a little bit too much. Anyway, the horns keep growing, and as the horns grow, his powers kind of increase. He's getting angrier and angrier, and he starts wanting like revenge. He finds out that Heather Graham, as this waitress called Veronica, has been spreading lies about him to the police, saying that she saw him come back to the bar, grab Marin, and throw her in his car, which never happened. And it couldn't have, because he knows now that Terry was the one who took her out of the bar. And he says, why are you lying? She says, I want to be famous. I want to be on TV. Aren't I pretty enough to be on TV? I'm going to get my breasts lifted. And I think then they want to put me on my own TV show. Again, he's reading this from her thoughts. And, so he just kind of storms out, leaves her there for the moment. He's trying to follow all the leads he could follow to figure out what happened. He tries to talk to Dale, and Dale is really pissed off at him. Just says, you killed my daughter, and get out of here. I ought to kill you. He says, I didn't kill your daughter, and he just won't believe him. But nothing that he will say will convince Dale, that he didn't do it. And we find out that there was some DNA evidence that was at a lab, and the lab burned down. And his father later tells him that he had a friend who worked at the lab, and he had him destroy the evidence. He said, why'd you do that? That could have exonerated me. He thought he was protecting his son, even though he doesn't really like him. And that was kind of interesting. Then, as things go on, like I said, the horns are getting longer and longer. He's getting angrier and angrier. Now he starts wanting to punish people, and he realized that he's in this weird barn, and there's all these snakes, and he's a little freaked out. He's going to kill one of the snakes with a pitchfork. And he realizes that they're actually following him, and he can kind of command them to do what he wants. And he goes back to the diner and waits for the waitress, Veronica, to leave and get into her car. And then he commands all these snakes to bite her to the point that she's not pretty anymore. He says, nobody's going to put you on a TV show now. She's screaming. And he doesn't kill her, but he has her, maimed by these snakes. And then he... as things progress, he finds out that the one person who does not see the horns is his friend Lee, who is also his attorney, who's the only one who believes him, only one who believes that he didn't do anything. Like I said, he gets into a fight with Terry at his club, and the cops come and arrest him, and then, he uses his powers of influence to make them start making out with each other and ignore him. But they arrest him anyway, and Lee comes and bails him out. Says, you're going to have to stop doing these things. He realizes that Lee is wearing Marin's crucifix. He said, where'd you get that? Why are you wearing that? And he says, well, there's things about me and Marin that you don't know. And he says, were you sleeping with her? Were you fucking her? He starts getting really mad. He says, it wasn't like that. And then he starts lying. He starts saying that, he yanks the cross off of his neck, and then because it's not on him any longer, he can see the horns now. And he kind of tries to, waffle a bit. It's not what you think, and it was only for a couple of months, and you just won't hear it. He storms off. A couple of other, things happen. Again, he's still trying to reconcile with Marin's dad, and he talks to Glenna and asks her, why are you still in this stupid town? Why don't you go someplace else and, make a life for yourself? She said, I can't leave. She says, why not? She says, because I'm in love with you. He says, oh, that's ridiculous. She says, I suppose you really knew that all the time. He said, yeah, I knew it, but, you should still go. And because he has this power to compel, the press are still hounding him, and he does something funny. This is kind of the comedy part of the thing, where he tells them, why don't you guys all beat each other up, and the one who's left can have an exclusive interview for me. And they start doing this, right? This big fight. They're punching and kicking and strangling each other in the parking lot of this outside the police station, and so now they're kind of off his neck, and he goes somewhere else, and it eventually turns out that he figures out that the person who he asks, when he was talking to Terry, he saw some other stuff. Terry woke up in his car and found that there was a rock next to him with blood on it. There was also blood on his hand and blood on his shirt. And he freaked out because he was so drunk he didn't really know what had happened. And he thought he would be implicated, so in Marin's murder. He finds Marin's body, but he doesn't call the cops. He doesn't call anybody because he's kind of a coward. He takes the rock, wraps it in it, takes his shirt off, wraps it in the shirt, wipes all the blood off his hand, throws the shirt into the lake so that nobody can find it and nobody can and then he just leaves. He drives away. That gets Ig just absolutely frantic, and he beats Terry up basically, and he's almost going to kill him, but he stops. And then he makes him take a whole bunch of drugs, and like a whole huge pile of cocaine and some LSD. He says, "I want you to experience everything Marin experienced when she was alone out there in the woods." And he does through this LSD trip, and that's very freaky. It was very well filmed, I thought. Then he realizes it wasn't Terry, despite the fact that he found the rock. And eventually it comes down to there's only one suspect left, and that's Lee. And he realizes that Lee was always jealous of his relationship with Marin. They were always kind of like a threesome. They did everything together. Lee's the one who fixed the crucifix, not him. And he kind of always resented the fact that Marin ended up with him and not with Lee, because he loved her too. And he's the one who he came upon Marin in the forest, and she's crying and talking, and he's trying to convince her that he loves her and that there's something between them. And she said, "No, you don't understand. You're just my friend, and I still love Iggy, and I'm very sorry for what I had to do to him." He starts making advances towards her, and she says, "No, go, stop it." And he won't stop. And eventually, he starts hitting her, and he rapes her, and then bashes her brains in with this rock. And then he put the rock in Terry's car. So he's really an evil fuck, and we don't discover this until Ig touches him and he sees this vision. They have a big fight, and Ig is wounded, and he knocks him out, puts him in his car, his AMC Gremlin, and pours gasoline all over it, and lights a match, throws it in the window, and somehow Ig still manages to drive it off the end of the pier. It plunges into the water. He tells the cops that Ig killed himself and that he confessed to Marin's murder before doing so. Well, it turns out that's not true, and this is part of the horror part of the movie. Ig is very badly burned, but he has not been killed. These horns have somehow protected him, and now they're really long, and they're curling, and he comes up out of the water and goes again to confront Marin's father. And now that he sees that Lee lied and he's not dead, he didn't commit suicide, he's starting to question, well, maybe Lee lied about other things too. And they confront Lee, and he comes to the treehouse in the forest, which was where they're meeting. And preface, I forgot something. Now that he's starting to believe Ig, he gives him something that Marin had given him, which is a key. And she said, she wanted you to have this, and the key has a little tag that says for Iggy. And they go to the treehouse, and they confront Lee. Dale has a shotgun, and he says, "You have to go to the police now and tell the truth." And he says, "Okay, I'll go to the police." Ig still has his pitchfork, which he's also using to threaten Lee into doing the right thing. Terry's there as well, and there's a struggle, and Lee pretends at first that he's going to go along, and then he struggles. He grabs the shotgun away from Dale, shoots him, blows his head off, which is shown in kind of graphic violence, which I really didn't need to see. I thought that was a bit gratuitous, but again, it's a good special effect, but very gross, and I don't like that kind of thing. But then Lee grabs the pitchfork and starts to stab Ig with it, and he turns back he takes the crucifix off. When he I forgot an essential point. When he puts Marin's crucifix on, and all of a sudden the horns are gone. Everything vanishes. He's normal again. And people seem to have forgotten everything that's happened up to that point. So the crucifix actually protects him because it was Marin's, and she was sort of watching over him, I guess, through the use of this crucifix. When he confronts Lee in the forest, he takes it off, and the horns grow back. First, you see he has like angel wings, and then they catch on fire. He turns from an angel into a full-on demon with really big curling horns. His face is all red, and it's basically made out of like solidified fire. And he and Lee struggle. Lee stabs him a couple of times with the pitchfork, apparently mortally wounding him. But he takes one of these horns and stabs Lee right through the heart. And then he summons a serpent, and the serpents all wind around Lee, and one of them stabs right into the wound, and then goes all the way through his back and down into his mouth and kills him. And then you see that it collapses, and he had used the key to open the locked trap door in the treehouse, and finds a note for him from Marin in Morse code. And he reads it and realizes that she's the reason that she really broke up with him. Her mother had died of cancer, and she had been diagnosed with the same cancer and was going to die. That's why she couldn't marry him, and she couldn't bring herself to tell him. And that's what it says in the note. So he dies. He basically solidifies into like wood. He says, vengeance. I had my revenge, but it turns out that vengeance destroys, and he solidifies. And then you go back to the first scene, and he's with Marin, apparently in the afterlife, and that's where it began. And they're making love, and they're going to be together forever. Kind of morally ambiguous. I wondered at this, here's this guy, and granted, all he was doing was trying to clear his name, because he didn't murder his girlfriend. But he did all these horrible things with this power he was getting. He made people fight each other. He made the bartender, burn down his bar. He made the two cops out themselves, basically. He killed he very badly wounded, the girl from the bar, the diner. He did all these awful things, and yet he's rewarded in the afterlife because he loved Marin. I think that was kind of morally ambiguous. I don't know if that's intentional, maybe, on part of the director. Maybe he was sort of having a joke saying, this is the way religion teaches people things are, but it's not really that way. Things are not black and white. You're not either good or evil. Everybody's a bit of both. And if that was the case, then I think it came across that way. I don't know if I can really recommend it. If you like really weird, strange things, Daniel Radcliffe's performance is fantastic, as was basically everybody, and particularly Max Minghella as Lee was really good. And Juno Temple was very, very good and very beautiful as Marin. Kelli Garner as Glenna was good. Heather Graham is always good. She has great comic timing. She was very funny in this too. Everybody, all the supporting cast were really good. It's well shot. It's interesting. Again, I think it's just kind of a matter of, I don't know if the writer and or the director wanted it to be one thing or another, but it ends up being like a mess. It's basically a hot mess, and yet somehow it works. Again, Horns from 2013.